morning, Trumptopia! Are you awake yet, my friends? Are you awake yet? It is the 9th day of the 7th month of the 217th year since we nailed a guy to a cross and pretended to believe in his teachings. I am your host, the Incorrigible Mr Zeppo. And this is Good Morning Trumptopia. Let's get started. Hello and namaste, my friends. It is I, the Incorrigible Mr Zeppo, your friendly neighborhood transcendental, transdimensional being from another dimension? / whatever the other thing I said? Transcendental? What would be the another ental? Thank you for tuning in. It is a strange moment in history that we are living through, my friends, and let it not be underestimated. Let it not be underestimated. I know it's already being overestimated, but let it not be underestimated that the big G20 summit was an epic deal on multiple fronts, and not just the obvious ones. And I know that there's so much to unpack from the events and the words, not just of our fearless and clueless leader, but also everyone else and the media, and it's epic. It's epic, my friends. First of all, I want to start the show off, despite my notes, and people might think that I'm completely disorganized, but I really do put a little bit of thought and effort, and I do really mean a little bit, into organizing some bullet point things that I want to try and hit. But I simultaneously dedicate this hobby as a practice of invoking words from beyond my ego. Let's put it that way. And that I try to invoke a receptive state, and for inspiration to arrive. And I am inspired to, despite my notes, start off with a few words on my unpopular opinion about the protests and the protest movement at large. And I describe it as an unpopular opinion because, as with most things, I see beyond the black-white dichotomy polemic bullshit that we get slammed with and that we get kind of cornered into, okay? So most people would assume that if I'm anti-Trump, which I'm not completely, mind you, and that's a confusing thing to people. I think people want everyone else to be really clear and black and white on the divisions that they've chosen for themselves. So as you seek out an entertainment choice or a philosophical, thought-provoking something to listen to, you might be clinging to the notion that you want me to be 100%, 130, 150% anti-Trump. And I'm not. Trump's a human being. And that human being is calling out for healing more than anything else. There's a lot of people who hear me say that, and their knee-jerk response is, whoa, what the fuck? But I digress, because I said I wanted to say express my unpopular opinion about the protests. It's sort of the inverse opposite of my unpopular opinion about Trump. We, the people, the Joe Schmoes of the world, the 98% of us who live at the mercy of the system, whether we live in well-off conditions or in less than well-off conditions. The vast majority of us, whether we're comfortable and safe or in at risk, at risk populations, and living in discomfort and unhappiness, we all have a few things in common. And that's that we all of us live under, we're born into and have lived under our entire lives a system of oppression, a system of mind control, a system of ideological divide and conquer and brainwashing, all to serve the profiteering interests of the global war profiteers. There's a bunch of names for them, and there's all kinds of labels we could use, but ultimately it boils down to that. They profit on global human conflict at every possible level. So, what does that have to do with why is my opinion on the protesters unpopular? Yes, we, the oppressed, must make a stand. And yes, we, the oppressed, must be organizing for a revolution. But, and here's where my opinion gets unpopular, the revolution will not be played out in the streets with rocks and bottles and burning piles of trash and burning cars. That is not the revolution that will liberate us from the oppression, my friends. That is the retaliatory and gateway opening path to being more oppressed and inducing more violence from the system. I'll put it to you another way. And this opinion is very unpopular because a lot of people want to be out there on the streets venting their anger and their frustration and their zeitgeist and their all those things, their fear, ultimately, their fear that we, the multitudes, will be oppressed indefinitely and ultimately, destroyed by the system which both sustains us and inculcates us in the system. My friends, anyone out there who may be listening who consider themselves either an active and legitimate protester or a would-be, soon-to-be, one day protester, anybody out there willing to put their lives on the line, I applaud your bravery. But I humbly, and I say this with love and compassion and respect, I humbly invite you to remind yourself that if you are spewing hate, if you are propagating violence, if you are blindly falling for the ego trap that they've laid out for you, then you're not a participant in the revolution. You are a puppet on a string, and you're being used by the system to rationalize the police state to all those who aren't on the street protesting. There are two kinds of protesters, my friends, and I'm not trying to divide and conquer. I'm not trying to pit two people against each other. But there's a protester that will pick up a rock or a brick or a bat and will beat the shit out of someone because that's how upset and frustrated they are. And they won't really stop to consider who it is they're beating the shit out of. It's usually a cop. And then they get their asses pounded and they get arrested, right? And while I understand the seductive logic for the call to violence against the oppressors, it is a lie. It is a gateway drug to an endless loop of violence. Let me share with you an unpopular opinion, my dear protesting friends, because I say this with love and respect. I stand with you in solidarity. I just stop shy of the acts of violence that many of you are willing to participate in. And I see all the arguing, and I know that there are protesters who have never lifted a finger in violence. I know that there are people out there who have never thrown a rock or a bottle or a Molotov cocktail or lit, a car on fire or whatever. And to you, I say, bless your heart, keep staying on the side of nonviolence and invest deeper in those practices. keep making your stand there in the place of nonviolence. It's to those who are seduced by the glory of fighting back with violence that I have to tell you, I have to remind you of something that's really, really important. There's a reason why we have symbols in ancient mythology. And I don't want to get into an argument about that right now, but let me bring to you one particular symbol that is salient, poignant, and pertinent right now, especially to those who feel the calling, quote-unquote, to a more violent version of the revolution that needs to happen. A more outward, physical manifestation of, decapitating the bad guys. Here is a symbol you need to meditate on. Hydra and its infinite heads. Here is the meaning of that symbol. Every valiant hero that recognized that Hydra was an evil demon from some horrible place and needed to be vanquished went with some plan of violence. Some exponentially increasing plan of violence, because every hero that approached the Hydra in order to chop off its heads, to end its tyranny of fear, guess what they discovered? Hydra's heads came back manifold, exponentially increasing with each chop. Let me tell you, my dear friends, my brothers and sisters in resistance, we cannot chop all of Hydra's heads off. I've said it before, say it again. I want to spend a moment on this right now, and I've already gone way past my opening segment of the show. So yeah, my friends, if you're out there and you are seduced, if you are on the resistance side and you are being seduced by violence, you're being convinced by others to participate in acts of violence against the oppressors, remember this fact. It's important. We cannot win vis-a-vis violence. We will not achieve violence. We will not achieve peace through violence. We cannot subdue Hydra by chopping off its heads, because with every act of violence, a multitude of new violence springs back in retaliation against us. That is the nature of the beast. That is the trap that the oppressor has painted you into a corner about, and is invoking you, is seducing you, is trying to get you to fall into the trap. You are pressed up against a corner. Your life is in danger, and the system of oppressor that profiteers on you and your life and your suffering wants you to fight back with violence. Because the moment you do, you surrender your goodness. You give up your virtue. You abdicate your truth, and you become a part of the problem. And you become another willing victim of the system of oppression. As we continue to resist, we must always return to the seat of nonviolence, to the very throne of love and compassion and forgiveness that resides in our heart. Otherwise, we will fail. Don't think that I'm onto something. You think I'm wrong? You think I'm laughably wrong? Take a look at history. Every bloody revolution that has decapitated the oppressors has only put more people in charge that became what? Successors to the oppression and successors to the oppressors. Every bloody revolution. There's posts about it in American context. A friend of mine who, a social media connection of mine, we're not personal friends, but he's someone that he's a young fellow that I have a kind of keen interest in, who's slowly coming around to realizing that while he's had many clear and true insights, he's also caught up in a lot of nonsense and a lot of ideological bullshit that he's clinging to, because he spews a lot of hate. And if you're spewing hate, you are part of the problem. You are not facilitating the solution. You are not the good guy if you are spewing hate against any other group of human beings. Full stop. That is a fact. Go ahead and try to debunk me. I hate no one, my friends. I bring nothing but compassion and tough love. If my words get challenging at times, that does not mean I hate a group of people. But anyways, this gentleman on Facebook posted a meme that was about the American Revolution. Invoking the whole thing about taxation is theft and how we fought against our oppressors who wanted to subjugate us. The United Kingdom, the British elitist system of privateering empire. And I think it was George Washington telling off some redcoats, and he says, Will won't stand for that. I wish I had it popped up, but I don't. It'll take me forever to find it. And he says, ironically, though, in the future, our very own citizens will take up your ideals and ironically call themselves progressives. And that meme misses the point. Right? It's just there to spew some hate. It's there to pretend to align extreme right values and position the progressives as the bad guys. But it misses the point. Because anyone who subscribes to that meme or anyone who gets offended by that meme is then falling for the pit trap of division amongst ourselves, the united communities of America. We are supposed to be united. That's why we call ourselves the USA. We call ourselves the USA because we are multiple states that are each large enough to be a country unto its own, and instead we united in order to create one nation. Was that founding system pure and pure of heart and completely innocent of intent? Fuck no. The Founding Fathers owned corporations. The Founding Fathers were all slave owners. The Founding Fathers treated women like objects. The Founding Fathers weren't all Christians. The Founding Fathers were flawed and imperfect in a bunch of different ways and did not have the all-seeing clarity of vision that many people attribute to them. But they most certainly were trying their best at a given time, in a given era, in a given historical context. Let's zoom back here to the present. We face a time, we are on the precipice of a time of awakening. No one out there is awake yet, buddy. Anybody out there patting themselves on the back and proclaiming their wakefulness is caught in an ego trap. Sorry to burst your bubble. You are not awake. I am not awake. I have never claimed to be awake. What I'm saying is, awakening is an organic, natural process that is our birthright. And we have been denied it for centuries, and the evidence of this conspiracy of oppression is scattered throughout history. And we can continue to waste our time arguing about which ideological construct is the best, which is the way they keep us oppressed, my friends. They keep feeding us new ideological constructs to be addicted to and to fight with everybody else over about. That's why patriotism. That's why statism. That's why no matter which country you go to, the people in that country think that they are the ones that are the most virtuous, and that the rest of the world's corrupt, evil bastards are the ones that got the problem. Obviously, that sort of division, that sort of divide and conquer rhetoric is being exposed and is being awakened from. But there's so many more layers, my friends. Just because you realize taxation is theft, or really, more technically accurate, extortion, because you sort of get cajoled into giving it through peer pressure and through sort of normalization of the act. You don't really get mugged. But it's a nuanced distinction. I'm not trying to diss all the taxation is theft folks. I'm on your side. But ironically, or conversely, we still have to organize, right? I'm always bringing this up. If we have a bloody revolution now and we guillotine all the bad guys, whoever they are, whoever decides who the bad guys are, moral dilemma, who decides who the bad guys are? That's another thing we don't spend a lot of time thinking about when we're caught up in the fury of wanting a bloody revolution. Who decides who the bad guys are? You? The person who just killed a bunch of people? To achieve your bloody revolution? Or some vestige of the previous state? The moment we start deciding who the bad guys are, we run the risk of becoming bad guys. Because judgment is sort of anathema to love and compassion. Judgment sort of neutralizes. I don't want to call it the exact opposite because that doesn't make linguistic sense, but in metaphysical terms, and I know that can be dismissed rather easily, but let's just take it into really normal, everyday, understandable terms. You and a sibling, you have a turbulent relationship. You always have had. You can spend your time judging them and trying to rationalize why they are mistreating you or misunderstanding you or holding you up to standard that you don't deserve to be at, whatever it is. Or you can invest in loving them, forgiving them, and treating each other with compassion. Stepping up to that. It's not easy. But it's much easier and much more self-destructive to sit around judging each other. And that's what they want. That's what the system of oppression cajoles us into. That's what the system of oppression is indoctrinating us to believe is the normal, everyday routine of things. Judge, separate. Let's put you over there in a group because you're not like me. Anyways, I digress. So many things to talk about. We're definitely going to be doing multi-part Good Morning Trumptopia today. The future... I brought up the whole protest thing because in Hamburg there was what started off as pretty reasonable, peaceful protests and quickly devolved into sort of almost a reality TV show mock-up of violent protests. It was kind of silly. I kept thinking to myself, wow, those road barriers or blockades that the protesters have set up and lit on fire sure look silly and dwindle in comparison to like the size of the barricades in Les Miserables. It's like we can only afford enough energy and enough rubble to make a 2.5-foot barricade and light that on fire, not a 15.5-foot barricade. I don't know why I thought that was funny, but obviously those protests could have become much more violent riots. And obviously they could have gone much more peacefully. But there's two kinds of protesting, right? The kind that ultimately renders up violence. And then there's the kind that we're not seeing a lot of. Obviously the mainstream media cherry picks what kinds of protest activities get broadcast. But to all those out there, brothers and sisters in the resistance, why don't we spend a little more time investigating the efficacy and impact of true peaceful protest, which is greatly empowered by the act of meditation in the middle of the protest, or as itself as an act of protest. How much more? I posit this as a legitimate question for intelligent and respectful discussion and or debate. But, I mean, obviously it can be easily dismissed out of hand because meditation is perceived as just sitting there and doing nothing. That can be further from the truth. But there's only one real legitimate way to find out, and that's to conduct scientific experiments of our own, which can then be repeated and verified by others. So to anyone out there listening who knows of organized protesting, that's coming up, I urge you, I beg you, let's try to collaborate on these organized protests that may or may not be coming up, and try to incorporate some conscious meditation for peace, for healing of those who are oppressing us. That's my unpopular opinion. And that's why all of my episodes tend to kind of swirl the same drain, because I'm really, really worried that we are going to get swept right up into the trap that the oppressors are lining us into. There's as things stand now, we only really have the illusion of free speech because we get cajoled into violence, and then as soon as we are acting out violently, we are no longer actually exercising our free speech. We're just spreading violence and breeding violence and invoking violence to be enacted upon us. There are other ways to exercise our free speech that do not require us to become, to give up our tools of peacefulness Okay, so other than the protests in Hamburg, as an attempt to try to get the attention of the elite, who it was very interesting and curious to notice that almost every channel that I flip through, because as you guys know, I try to do an even-handed scan of the left and the right mainstream cable media, not because I believe in what they're saying. I'm not that silly, but because their job is not to down. I don't want to relitigate this. I have my reasons. If you guys have been listening to the podcast, you understand that I'm there not to be fed nonsense, but rather to sort of be, see what isn't being talked about, see what's going on between the lines. And it was interesting to note that it was uniform across the spectrum, that the commentators enjoyed the humorousness of how the leaders of the world, the leaders of the G20, that elite group, would normally have in the past conducted this meeting in more remote locations, so that it's much more difficult excuse me, for the general public to approach them with protest actions. But that this time around they wanted particularly Germany, and I'm totally blanking on her name right now, but is she the president or is she prime minister? Angela Merkel, wanted to show the world that, Germany could be a place for both free speech, democratic expression of dissent, and, the political elites' agenda, propaganda con. Forgive the coughing, folks. I probably returned to the podcast project too soon. I was still fighting off a bit of a nasty cold. So many strange, nuanced details that we could unpack out of the coverage anyways. I think the most interesting for me, the one that's kind of a linchpin moment, and people are making hay about this, but they're not on either side of the echo chambers that I've perceived. I'm just addressing the mainstream media. I'm sure that somewhere on the alt-left and the alt-center, because both exist in my opinion, there are people who are pinging this too. But I'm just addressing it because it was quite curiously covered. And nobody was addressing it in the way I would have addressed it on the mainstream media. Whoever else out there is taking this same sort of vantage point, huzzah. I don't mean to sound like I'm scooping anybody or that I'm special or better than anybody else. But we've already, the echo chambers are, both sides are calling it the handshake seen around the world. But of course, it was quite one of the most anticipated moments in contemporary political history, for Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump to be in the same room, face to face, and to shake each other's hands was epic. And the linchpin moment, I think, was when Trump, in classic Trump form, very demurredly, very beta male style, very sort of submissively. And I know that's not his image or his brand or his general self-promotion, but he typically, he has expressed this kind of behavior before around people that he knows are at least on par with his own, bullshittery of claims to power and grandiose claims of wealth. When he turns to Putin and says out loud for the media to capture, "It's an honor to be with you." Not an honor to meet you. Let that nuanced difference sink in. It's an honor to be with you. Now, granted, I wasn't there, so I'm not entirely clear. None of the coverage was particularly specific about the exact timeline of when that moment happened in relationship to the overall conference and the long 2.5 hour meeting behind closed doors. Presumably, that moment was probably either just before, just after the closed door session. But who knows, right? But I think it's a really interesting thing. Trump is, despite all the negative things that one could say about Donald Trump, and I'm not really, I've already said the most negative things I feel are needed to be said about him. I'm really not here to just beat up on him. That's not, like I said, if you're spewing hate, I don't care who you're spewing hate about. If you're spewing hate about Donald Trump, then you're not part of the solution. You are part of the problem, because all you're really doing is perpetuating hate. So I'm not here about that. I'm not here to do that. But I am here to investigate and discuss and really try to take a deep, thoughtful look. So I did notice that there was some online article floating around, beginning to enter the circles of Facebook and other social media platforms. Its headline was "Body Language Reveals More Than Words," or something like that. And it was juxtaposing two sets of pictures: Vladimir Putin and Hillary Clinton in a face-to-face, chair by chair sort of photo op, just like the one that I'm referencing with Trump and Putin. And it's quite obvious that the body language is dramatically different there. At the simplest level, you could say, well, it's just that the two of those two, the Clinton and Putin, were, either genuinely or for the scripted purposes of politics, play acting at their supposed, opposition to each other. And then, of course, the body language, a snapshot depicting the body language of Trump and Putin. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you know anything about body language, then you know about, gesture reciprocation. There's other labels for it, too, but that's what I like to call it because it's a little bit more clear. That when two people increase their synchronicity, in other words, are unconsciously and consciously expressing their mutual appreciation and their growing bond, they start reciprocating each other's subtle body language. So, for example, in the picture specifically used for that article, which I didn't read the whole thing of, I just noticed the headline and had to move on to stuff. I was actually on my way to shut down my computer. And I thought it was pretty obvious because I thought very similar lines of thinking. That if nothing else, the way in which, even before this meeting, I'd always thought that sort of the unconscious, off-the-cuff, off-script moments when Trump has directly addressed his feelings about Putin have been really revealing. This was the most revealing thing of all. To see them standing there like they were old school, college buddies that, think exactly the same way, love the same shit, and have each other's back and are, have a kind of us versus the world mentality. These guys looked like they were deeply in sync, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, if that term can be applied there. Yes, even in negative terms, there's spiritual activity going on, even amongst those that are quote-unquote the bad guys. Because just because someone's a bad guy does not mean they have no soul. That's us versus them division brainwashing in order to inculcate us into fighting the bad guys instead of healing them of their spiritual malady. You see what I'm saying? Do you get my point yet? Are you awake yet, Trumptopia? Anyways, I thought that this moment was deeply fascinating, and I think that it, at an intuitive, undebunkable, I don't know for a fact that it's true, but I sure as hell can't believe that it isn't true. These two men are in sync with each other in a way that should not be so if all the bullshit about what they really, what they have politically claimed to stand, it shouldn't be so, right? If Russia is really our enemy that we are, just been putting up with, or just not our best friend, an antagonistic, occasional ally, however you want to describe it. If that is so, then what? And the United States is, leaders of the free world, and that Russia represents the opposite of the free world. Then why are they so jolly and so, on sync with each other? And why would he say it's an honor to be with you? That's something that an individual who is trying to suck up to somebody says. Now, I know, I get it. Anybody who supports Donald Trump still is going to rally right to the bullet points of, we need a better relationship with Russia. He's not sucking up. He's being politically savvy and buttering him up to do his own. I think I've spent a lot of my adult and my real life, my personal life, intrigued and fascinated by male behavior, about how we treat other males. As a person who sort of identifies beyond the typical stereotype of manliness and malehood, what it is to be a man, I think it's very fascinating to observe much more, quote-unquote normal male behavior tropes or stereotypes be expressed. And if I had to analyze that situation, I'm not by any means an expert, but I'm sure some experts might agree. In that room, the man, in that moment of it's an honor to be with you, the man who had already established his dominance, his alpha status over the other man, and this is psychologically, subconsciously deeply important, and obviously it's a big ego thing. So anybody in like a statist power position is going to be deeply ego motivated, in my opinion. And it was clear to me, Putin had already pre-existing established authority as the alpha male, and that Trump was the suck up beta male who was just prepared and ready to adore the alpha for any and all qualities, whether they are, good or horrific. And not willing to lift a finger or say one negative thing against him. Now, I think that the mainstream media and the statists are having a really crazy time with this, because they can't let themselves acknowledge what this probably means in truth. They have to play the pretendo game of like, we don't understand what this means. What could this possibly mean? This moment of submissiveness. I mean, from the fact that Trump was reciprocating Putin's body language, and that even when he took the lead or took the initiative behaviorally, when he offered his hand, it was a submissive handshake, not a dominant handshake. A neutral handshake, the hands extended perpendicular, to the other person. When one offers a submissive handshake, the palm is facing straight up. When one offers a dominance handshake, the palm is facing down. You know what I'm saying? This is subconscious behavioral stuff about a person offering a handshake. The person who sticks the hand out first. They're there to sort of, those three variants subtly communicate submission, or a position of balance of like, you are my equal, or I am superior to you. And to be quite frank, go take a look at it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. When within seconds of saying, either after or before, I forget whether he sticks his hand out and then says it, or if he says it and then sticks his hands out. But in that live footage, not anymore, it's obviously recorded, but if you look that up, it was recorded live. He says, it's an honor to be with you, and his hand is straight up. His hand is flat. His palm is facing up. That's like a puppy dog, like walking up to you with his tail between his knees, licking your shoe, and then rolling over on his belly. That isn't that begging for a belly rub is all about submission, and the human equivalent is an upturned handshake palm, especially amongst two men that otherwise, in separate of each other, would self-identify as the alpha. I mean, Trump is Trump. We all know he thinks alpha. That he is the alpha, yes, the most alpha, right? He had the audacity to say that he was the only person that could solve the problem. I mean, if that isn't an ego alpha, I don't know what else is. But here, confronted by the real-life persona, and by the way, folks, I've only got 4 minutes and 20 seconds left, ding, right now. So if you're in a position of safety and whatnot, please, and you participate in smoking cannabis for medicinal or recreational reasons, enjoy, be safe. Every time I hit 420, I want to, do that. Safety first, folks. Anyways, wrapping it up. I'm not endorsing that you smoke all day long or anything. I'm just saying, be clever. And I just like the number 420. The fallout from that has been fascinating, and no one's really called him out on the intensity of his submissive posturing. But what could this possibly mean? I hate to say it, folks, but someone else. Who was it? A very unlikely person. I have notes right here. Hold on 1 second. Newt Gingrich. I am not a Newt Gingrich fan. I do respect Newt for occasionally returning back to sort of centrist normalcy. And every time he kind of goes out to some far extreme crazy idea, he comes back and tries to paint himself as a centrist, or at least someone who's willing to return to center. Being centrist is not a bad thing, folks. Especially not in a world of exponentially increasing extremism on the ends of any and all polemics that we have. But I digress. Newt Gingrich, I saw it today, I believe on C-SPAN. He was speaking at the National Press Club, if I'm not mistaken. They offered him a funny coffee mug, and he kind of held it up like, isn't this cute, at the end of his little speech. And I'm not quoting him, I'm paraphrasing him severely, because I didn't have my note paper handy right then, but I was impressed. He was definitely spinning it on an anti-DNC kind of way, like, let's take a look at the Clintons. But he did zoom back and say, we really should take a look at all the foreign money that's flooding into our society at any and all levels. Those weren't his exact words, but this is sort of my paraphrasing of them. I understood him to mean exactly what I just said, though, whatever wording he said. That it's coming in. There's no denying. There is foreign influence coming in, and we should be looking at it, and we should be making organizational decisions about it, that... et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've got 1 minute and 42 seconds left in this particular segment. Gonna come back for part 2 in just a moment. If you have questions, comments, disagreements, and you can share them without spewing hate, by all means, post at me on any of my social media, especially Facebook or Instagram. Those are the ones I pay the most attention to. But if I see you on Twitter, if I catch you on Twitter, I will try to reply there too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with all the other ones. Yeah. Be right back, folks. Thanks for listening. This is Good Morning Trumptopia. I've just decided, instead of a part 2, I'm just going to continue some of these themes in a breaking news, because I've got things to talk about there as well. So, stay tuned for a episode of breaking news a little bit later today. As always, my friends, this has been the Incorrigible Mr Zeppo, and I wish you a peace-filled day today. May peace only be on you. Be good humans, my friends.